So have you decided you're going to vote for next year's election? I know for many people it's a really difficult decision. There's now a lot of evidence that voters across our continent feel that politics, or is that politicians, are not working for them. Dr. Webster Zambara at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. He's been looking at this question. Dr. Zambara, good afternoon to you. I find this all the time. People say, I'm not going to vote. I don't know who I'm going to vote for. Do we find this in other countries across Africa as well?
Good afternoon and good afternoon to your viewers. Indeed, this is actually, as they said, trend. If we are to base on the results of Afrobarometer surveys in 36 countries, we see a general decline in voting patterns, particularly among the youth. But it is also a question of the demand for democracy, interestingly, from the same research. The demand for democracy and democratic governance is high, but the appetite seems to be declining because the supply side of democracy seems to be decreasing. People are not getting the dividends of democracy, and they are beginning to wane, such that the voting patterns are beginning to show a tendency towards apathy, particularly among the youth.
Okay, I mean, why? Is democracy failing? It is your right not to vote. Is democracy failing? Perhaps maybe more likely there's nothing that attracts people to come and vote.
Well, a number of issues can actually be attributed to it. One is declining or diminishing trust among the populace. They lack trust in institutions of governance and governing leadership. So that trust is waning because the leadership is not acting in ways or governing in ways that citizens are seeing quick changes in their livelihoods. And the other thing is there are some key issues that affect people in their daily lives. And after an election, if they don't see any positive change, they tend to feel that voting becomes just a ritual exercise within the spectrum of governance and democratic governance, but it is not tangibly changing their lives and their livelihoods, such that in the end, people will say, fine, 5 years will come or 4 years will come, we will vote, but nothing really changes. And this trend is actually getting worse among the youths because the youths are becoming impatient with the governance system, to the extent that in some countries, some youth will tell you, we are now waiting for when will this independence end? Because they are told that we are voting because we are independent. But the independence is not bringing results. The independence is not changing their livelihoods. And one of the things that, for example, if you go to the youth particularly, in 36 African countries, all of them, unemployment is the biggest problem facing the youth. So if they vote and nothing changes, they remain unemployed, they remain poor, the next cycle of election comes, they don't see the change. Apathy tends to rise in those circumstances, unfortunately.
So, okay, we can blame the politicians, and Dr. Zambara, I'm very happy to talk to you for an hour about why I believe the politicians are responsible. But don't we also need to blame ourselves? We vote. and by you know, and I mean, this sounds like a political slogan, and maybe it is, but actually, people should be the change that they want to see. I mean, people must organize. Isn't that the solution?
Two issues I think are key. One, the style of governance that each country would have. If the governance style and the governance institutions are that there is a sense of accountability, the citizens will feel that they are part and parcel of how they are governed because they've got a stake. By voting, it means they've entrusted some people to run the affairs of the state in a way that helps them or at least assists them achieve their aspirations. So the style of governance also inspire people to be interested in participating in the whole governance process. Unfortunately, in many countries, the style of governance is such that after the election, People never seen their officials, the elected officials, until the next round of elections. The level of engagement between the citizenry, the elected and the elected, is so weak because one, institutions don't report to the electorate anymore. The ruling class, when they leave the electorate, they forget about them. Sure. So there's this gap between the citizens and the ruling class that is widening. That's why there's now no trust. The trust between the two has diminished to levels where the people have no appetite at all in voting. It's a bit different from when elections are coming soon after independence, or for example, in the case of South Africa in 1994. Sure. There was a very big expectation that if we have democracy, things will change. Now we are 3 decades into democracy, and some people are even at West beginning to compare the kind of government we have in terms of service delivery to the previous regime. Yeah. And this is not only South Africa. In many other African countries, you hear people comparing their independent states to previous regimes. That is unfortunate, and it speaks volumes of the failure of the independent states to transform the countries that they've inherited into developmental states in which everyone has a stake and everyone can benefit, or at least there is accountability on what and how our resources are being used for. Now, what we often get, we get a myriad of stories around how corruption manifests within the leadership and how service delivery is stifled, and the poor gets poorer, and the structures that were there during colonial times continue to be there, such that the people begin to lose faith in democracy as a way of governance. And this is quite unfortunate. So I agree with you. To some extent, the citizenry has to continue to be organized, to be active, and to demand that those that they are elected report to them and deliver on their promises. Okay. On the other hand, those that are elected should also play ball and make sure that they serve the people that elected them.
Okay, Dr. Zimbara, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's an example I want to put to you. It's interesting to see how the percentage of people who vote in elections can change. And let me use the United States. For a long time, only around half of the population voted in elections. In 2008, Barack Obama was the candidate. Yes, we can was the slogan. Millions of young people voted. The percentage of people who voted in the States went up to about 60%. In 2012, well, he'd been president for a term. He was just another politician. It went back to 50%. Then in the U.S., as the country became so divided, Trump versus Biden, literally everyone in the U.S. voted because so much was at stake. What does that tell us?
I think it speaks on the issues that have been put across towards an election. What are the key issues that have to galvanize society, such that everyone looks to the election season and to vote in order to influence the outcome? That's one thing. Secondly, it also goes to personalities. Especially in Africa, our politics has become so personalized that people don't even look at issues and what the campaigners are calling for. In most cases, it's actually the face of the person who wants to be elected and what he stands for. We have promoted the personality cult. At least luckily, for example, in the United States that you are talking of, when Trump tried to stifle the people's vote on January 6th, the institutions there stood firm and could continue to announce Biden as the winner. Now, in many African countries, the institutions that should protect the people in times of election are captured. You look at the electoral commissions, you look at the judiciary, you look at even the military being involved in electioneering or in elections, such that the generality of the people who have voted, they lose faith in the election process itself rather than have the confidence. However, we also note that whenever there is a potential for a change of government or change of leadership, it tends to come with a new energy that galvanizes the citizens to try to influence the outcome. But where we have almost continuous systems or outcomes, we tend to see people resigning because they don't have faith and energy to hope for change or any transition or transformation of their leadership.
Dr. Webster, Zambara, thank you at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. Really do appreciate the time, sir.